Usually, video games give you a very good feeling deep down. You found the treasures, you killed the dragon, you've successfully impregnated Elsa from Frozen. Okay, I admit that one only happens in vaguely discomforting online flash games, but the point still stands. Video games are almost always intended to give you that satisfactory victory, adrenaline burst that undoubtedly proves that PlayStation is worth far more of your time than, I don't know, human contact or something. And yet, sometimes you'll be playing a game, and all of a sudden, everything's ruined, and oh god, why is everyone dead? Here's gonna be 8 games that emotionally fucked me up. I'm only going with games that I personally played since, you know, it's hard to get drunk on booze I've never tasted. Metaphor! Also, beware of major spoilers on any of the following games. I'll start this list off with the easy one that most people would choose to include. Telltale Games made an episodic adventure game set in the world of The Walking Dead, starring a man named Lee, who becomes something of a surrogate father for Clementine, a little girl he meets alone in the initial outbreak. And if you haven't figured out how this game could gut punch you from the many opportunities this sentence has already allowed, I am never taking you on an Easter egg hunt with me. I mean, I probably wouldn't anyway though, since you're a random stranger on the internet, and I don't go on Easter egg hunts in the first place. But oh yeah, Lee and Clementine. This game is lousy with emotion. Most famous is the ending, where no matter what you do, Lee is slowly zombifying, and you have to tell Clementine whether or not to shoot him or leave him to die. Bummer. But the ones that really stuck with me were the hard decisions that keep coming up. Not so much on, say, saving Carly or Doug, because she's useful with a gun and he basically knew how to turn on TVs, but man did the car decision wreck me. Do you steal the supplies in a recently abandoned car in order to help your group, knowing that the certainly nearby owners will be screwed if you do? Or leave it all to strangers when your own people are in desperate need? Cause let me tell you, knowing that I'm a damn dirty thief who would also allow Ben to drop to his death out of a misplaced sense of pragmatism because I didn't want to risk anyone else's life in the group is not something that's that easy to realize. Also, I think I'm kind of a bastard for that one. Moving right along from one comic book property right into another, side note, maybe I need to broaden my horizons a little, we have Rocksteady Studios' critically and commercially acclaimed Batman Arkham City. And while that high praise may stem from perfectly refined gameplay, a stellar voice cast, brilliant use of the best rogues gallery in comics, memorable visuals, an expanded and detailed world to glide around in, a stellar balance of humor and darkness to give the game gravitas without becoming depressing, Catwoman's right, you know what, I need to stop listing things now. Point is, I feel like some of the praise is due to just how brave Rocksteady was in doing the unexpected. You see, licensed video games tend to play it safe. You don't shake things up too big in this type of game. Fans want to see their favorite characters basically identical to whatever movie, show, comic, radio drama, what have you they emerged from, which means you can't do really anything drastic. This held fairly true for Batman Arkham Asylum. Big spectacle without really threatening the status quo. So, when Rocksteady presents us with a plot of a disease-stricken Joker rapidly dying as the night goes on, we all figure it's the usual fare. No way he'll die in a video game plot. He'll be better before the night's through. And then he is better. Except he isn't actually. Then he dies on the floor and the game ends with you leaving his corpse on Gordon's car and the credits roll. It's brilliantly unexpected and heavy, morally nuanced. How can you feel so bad for such an unrepentantly horrible being? In my case, I probably felt so bad watching an absolute monster die because I too am a horrible monster who dropped Ben to his death thinking that saving him would just slow us down and get someone else killed, but no, I let a teenage boy die with absolutely no gain. Oh god, why? Joker's death and the ending to Arkham City was so powerful that when I went bowling with my youth group shortly after completing the story, I still couldn't get my mind off of what I'd just seen. I barely remember a damn thing about that bowling event, yet here I am, able to recall the exact sound of Joker's death rattle as he collapses on the floor for the final time. Sheesh. Here's a rather brilliant, often overlooked title I highly recommend you play. Enslaved is a loose adaptation of the ancient Chinese novel Journey to the West, only set in a post-apocalyptic landscape filled with war robots and Andy Serkis, as all stories ought to be. In it, Tripitaka, a girl tech-savvy but physically too small to get home alive against these war robots, uses slaver technology to force Monkey, a more physically capable individual, to get her back safely. A few twists in, and finding her home base slaughtered, she moves the goalpost and decides she needs to hunt down the man doing the slaving out of revenge, which means she still doesn't free Monkey. It's a nuanced game that explores topics like whether or not Stockholm Syndrome is playing a part in Monkey's character development, or the hypocrisy of the ends justifying the means, and the ending really whammies at home. In it, Trip, Monkey, and newfound friend Pigsy,
who dies,
make it to the Slaver's Pyramid, where they,
except for Pixie because he's dead,
discover that the main guy is actually a pre-war survivor who is only enslaving everyone he can in order to place them in a mental construct of better days long gone. Is this comforting lie actually a good thing? Who knows, cause Trip kills the man, snapping thousands of people back into dreadful reality before she begins to second-guess herself. The game ends on this ambiguity, never declaring one way or another how in the right or in the wrong these characters are. I admit though it was kind of funny when Pigsy gets exploded and the trophy pops up. Smoky bacon. Alright, don't judge me, this one's going to require some explanation to make any lick of sense. How the hell did a goofy kid's toy adaptation of freaking Star Wars possibly f*** with my emotions? Well, to start, I was a fairly sensitive kid. I had a lot of emotions, sue me. I had played a handful of video games with friends and had grown up with several edutainment computer games like Math Blaster, or that weird one with the floating box sidekick.
Owen's right. We've got to get into that city.
How are you gonna do that? No one knows where it is.
I do!
Who are you?
I am Laptrap, the Turbo Turtle.
Yeah, no, that still doesn't explain anything. Back to the point, LEGO Star Wars on our computer was the first time my parents ever got me a real video game. It was a blast! I spent hours in Dexter's Diner, trying to beat the ridiculously challenging vehicle levels, and being sexually confused by Padme's midriff outfit, shut up, so I was very invested in this new world. First time it broke me was when I purchased a battle droid. Probably one of the yellow commanders, I always did love those. Anyway, the moment a villain character sets foot in the world, things go crazy, and it distressed me. Previously, the parking lot had always been an absolute utopia, everyone coexisting in peace. But with a bad guy around, the various Jedi and clones I had unlocked suddenly burst out into a near-riotous frenzy. Oh boy, did I feel guilty. Due to the endless respawning nature of the game, what was once a calm getaway place between story levels was now an endless parade of laser fire and screams of virtual death, and it was all my fault.
They say once you see war, you'll never be the same.
But little me wasn't done with the trauma just yet. The real kicker came in at the end of Episode 3's finale. A majority of the level is spent with both characters cooperating through the lava-filled world, falling apart as you go. And with some of the hardest platforming in the entire freaking franchise, it's quite an uphill trek. At least, though, I wasn't alone. All the while, I had an AI-controlled player, too, at my back. Even though it was somewhat formless, always changing to the character I didn't want, and was frankly kind of an idiot, I had definitely grown a bond with my invisible string-of-code buddy. Player 2 was my friend. Then, in what was a very shocking gameplay twist, you finally get to the end zone of the level, and cooperation turns to combat. The final boss of the game is your companion. You see, the final battle isn't preset against Obi-Wan or Anakin, as you can tag back and forth to whichever one you'd rather play as. The final boss is the other player. In my case, the friendly AI I had grown to care for over hours of play had turned enemy in the last minutes of that level. I had to kill my helper. I distinctly remember just sitting there and staring at the screen for a few minutes after, return to main hub flashing at me in front of open space, waiting for me to acknowledge it.
I was never whole again after that.
Assassin's Creed is certainly not a series afraid to just whack you upside the head. From the mind-shatteringly unexpected twist in 2, or the tragically pointed ending of Brotherhood, I knew ahead of time that Revelations was not going to hold back on its ending, but in place of the same major mind-melting twist, this one doubled down on raw emotion. After having witnessed Altair's lifelong triumphs and tragedies on First Civ memory disks, Ezio is finally able to unlock Altair's sealed library under Masyaf. Now, anyone with basic knowledge of human biology will know that obviously Altair has passed away many years before, but actually seeing him skeletonized and slumped over in a chair in the middle of the room hits home powerfully. To make matters worse for me, the fragile viewer of these events, it quickly gets depressing as Altair is holding one last memory disk in his hand. You have to take control as Altair says one last goodbye to his son, the door sealing behind him, and as he extinguishes the lights, Al-Mualim's voice echoes introspectively in his mind.
In much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow.
As he places the apple of Eden on its stand, one last objective comes up on the screen. Sit a moment and rest. You sit him in the chair, and in his last act he records his final moments on the disc as he slumps over dead. But wait! There's more. Ezio takes one look at the Apple of Eden before casting his equipment, the equipment you've been collecting and using for 3 games now, to the side, sadly declaring that he knows all of his hardships and accomplishments over decades of effort have only amounted to a side plot in someone else's journey. He basically declares that his battles and goals were nearly meaningless in the big picture. Once that's through, and you're good and thoroughly traumatized, the game then drops a vision of the first Civ being wiped out in cataclysmic events. Why yes, it does include a mother holding her crying baby closer in a futile effort to offer any protection as flames engulf the both of them. Thanks for asking. Oh yeah, and if you pre-ordered the game, you also get a short film showing Ezio's death, where his wife and young daughter watch him expire not far from the location Ezio's father and brothers were executed, because life is fleeting and death embraces us all. Pre-order at GameStop and get the Day 1 Deluxe Edition. Dishonored is what you would get if Bioshock, Deus Ex, Thief, and Assassin's Creed all went to a steampunk-themed orgy and knocked each other up like Elsa in that disturbing porn game I keep trying to scar you all with. You look at this and tell me there's a loving God. This beautiful bastard child of a game doesn't just give us magic whales and disproportionately large hands, however. Dishonored is home to one of my favorite morality dynamics in gaming. The world changes quite noticeably depending on how merciful you are. When I'm not busy dropping Ben like a pair of suddenly pubescent testicles, I like to think that I'm a decent person. So, my first playthrough was the good playthrough. This gave me plenty of time to buddy up to Samuel, Corvo's boatman. In the good playthrough, he's sportive and friendly, and the old sumbitch probably becomes the closest ally you have. So, going through a second time, slaughtering my way through a bad playthrough, I was plenty willing to overlook his grumpier demeanor and frequent criticisms of my tendency to whack guards with their buddies' separate heads. He and I were just so close in that other timeline after all. That made it all the worse in the ending when Samuel explicitly shows how much he detests you. Turns out he was tired of my passion for burying one unconscious man in a dumpster under 6 dead bodies, which in my defense is darkly humorous. And so, as he drops you off one last time, he tells you that you are just as bad as the men you are fighting and fires a flare gun into the air, alerting every guard to your presence immediately. I didn't want to lose my stealthy advantage, but killing my friend would just be barbaric, ignoring the fact that I already killed approximately 2/3 of Dunwall and recreationally threw their severed body parts willy-nilly. So I decided I would just knock his geriatric ass out instead. He promptly fell into the water and drowned. Seeing his lifeless body bobbing there really made me reflect on my actions. I mean, I still violently slaughtered the entire army guarding the final target, but I slaughtered the army very sadly. It's totally different. What's that? I haven't talked about a superhero in at least 5 minutes. For shame, past me. Fortunately, at least for my lack of a better segue, Infamous 2 will allow me to do just that. Infamous is all about electric super dude Cole McGrath, and is built on a do good or do evil binary system. Good options will side you with Quo, a nice ice hero. Bad options will side you with Nyx, who is powered by burning tar apparently. This is exactly how systems like this usually work in games. But much like a whoopee cushion hiding a butt plug, the developers use the unexpected to devastating effect. Cole and friends discover that there is a cure to the plague that's, well, plaguing everybody, old pal Zeke included. All they have to do is power up a device that will also kill everybody with the superpowered conduit gene. If they don't, even more unpowered people will die of the plague. Already a tough decision, but whichever option you pick goes against the character whose morality you've aligned with the entire game prior. See, Quo's not acting out of evil, but fearing unexpected death, she sides with the Beast, a man whose plan will kill everybody without the conduit gene, if you choose to sacrifice supers for the greater good. Nyx, however, does not fear death, and is willing to sacrifice herself despite her immoral tendencies. So if you've been evil, now you lose your partner in crime. Whoever was previously your closer ally is now part of the final battle against you. And let me tell you, neither ending is going to leave you happy. Pick the heroic ending, a sobbing Quo apologizes for acting out of self-preservation, Cole activates the sphere and all conduits across the globe, himself included, die, many of whom don't even know why, and families globally are racked with grief over sudden and unexpected deaths of their loved ones. Pick the villainous ending, and after violently putting Nyx down, Zeke stands up to you with his trusty revolver, still coughing up his lungs from the plague, unwilling to let the majority of people die without a fight. The game won't let it happen in a cutscene either. You have to press the button, multiple times to continue shocking Zeke until you see your best friend die at your hands. Then the Beast declares that he has seen too much to carry on any further, and makes Cole take on the Beast powers to finish his plan, forcing you to start the trek to activate all conduits, killing everyone else. That's right, this ending is so emotionally f***ing, a literal genocide-committing monster man gets f***ed up by it and gives up. That's pretty hard to top. Full disclosure, this entry may get a little heavy. I've been pretty cheeky up to now, but this game gut-punched me so hard after I completed it, it actually inspired me to put together this entire list. Things will get a little personal. 3/4 Home is a very straightforward game. You are a young 20-something Kelly. You are 20 miles from home and you are driving back. You have to keep one button pressed to keep your car moving, and you have the option to toggle the radio. The rest of the game is all about the storytelling. Your family calls you, and you choose your responses. Things get heavier the more you find out. Kelly has moved back in recently and feels distant from her folks. Her dad has had some sort of accident at his job and has lost his leg. He's turned to alcoholism to deal with the phantom pain and the trauma. Due to the poor economic shape of the family, Kelly has just recently applied to her dad's old job, just hoping to help support her family. Talking to her brother gives the implication that he's somewhere on the autism spectrum, and between everything else, her mother is clearly being stretched too far and doesn't quite know how to handle the stress from everything. All the while that is unfolding, a storm is approaching, and you start to hear updates from your family. Rain starts growing heavier and heavier around you. They tell you about the news reporting tornadoes touching down in the area. Most harrowingly, emergency sirens begin blaring continuously in the background as you get closer, never letting up once they've started. You get 5 miles out, which is 3/4 home, and things get bad. Your phone call cuts out, and you have to drive in the increasingly intense weather and the sirens alone, only to arrive and find your house half destroyed. The credits roll, but the game isn't done yet. You get thrown into an epilogue flashing back to many months before. Kelly is waiting for a bus, and you can choose to call her mother. Conversation reveals that they haven't spoken in months. Kelly is obviously suffering from major problems with depression, all of her friends have become distant, and her college grades are rapidly dropping. This part hits home particularly hard for me. After graduating high school in 2013, I started college at the University of Tennessee, and for the first couple of semesters, things went okay. On campus, I wasn't near my old friends or my then-girlfriend, side note, now wife. But trips home fixed that problem for me. Except in summer of 2014, my family moved to a new location, one that was now a few hours away from my friends. I was mostly cut off from everyone. I still saw my girlfriend on some weekends, but these visits would often be more than a month in between. When I was on campus, my roommate Wes was the closest friend I had. I just wasn't forming strong connections enough to keep new friends outside of classes, and I was very lonely. A then undiagnosed lifelong problem with depression came to a head, and I just couldn't function. Much like Kelly with her photography class in-game, even the classes I truly loved were just impossible for me to handle, and my grades plummeted. My closest support came from the wonderful man leading the on-campus Wesley Foundation, Pastor Tim, but due to a still widening rift in the Methodist Church over gay marriage, I couldn't really bring him up around my pastor father without getting the topic half dismissed. Dad had no idea what he was doing. It was next to impossible to communicate what was going on to anyone, so even after I had joined a support group, I was weeks before I even told anyone what was going on. I slowly lost the faith I had admittedly wrestled with for a while, something that I still really can't communicate to my family members. I finally had to come to terms with the fact that I just couldn't handle college in my mental state, and I've never returned. Now, I don't mean to make this entry all about me, but you really need to see where my headspace was to just follow on how hard this moment got to me. I played the game recently, July of 2018, less than a month before writing this list. Obviously, it's later than that because procrastinating making videos is fun. So, even a couple of years distance from dropping out, the epilogue scene with Kelly talking to her mother was rather devastating because of just how similar some of the details were. So, in this vulnerable state, I began to notice what the epilogue sequence was hinting at. Certain responses would begin breaking the narrative of the conversation, with the half-destroyed house materializing in the background above her head. Kelly did not actually have this conversation with her mother. She never called that day. Out of survivor's guilt, she's replaying a hypothetical conversation she just wasn't brave enough to have so many months ago. That's a haunting ending. Topping it off is just a subtle bit of extra content available from the main screen of the game. In it, you can read a few of Kelly's brother's short stories. all of which have themes applicable to the situations in the game, but one in particular shares a title with the game itself, 3/4 Home, revealing a hidden meaning. 3/4 Home isn't referring to Kelly's distance when things get bad. Not really. Only 3 of the 4 family members are home, both physically and metaphorically, when the storm takes them away. Kelly's distance is, indirectly, what permanently separated her from her home. If you are suffering from depression, please seek help. There is support out there for you, and so many people willing to listen and to help you out. You are not alone, and you have so much value.